a technician who was a Brit. He said to me, "Do you know what your name means?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Well, Frank is Celtic and it means Freemason or Freeman. And Douglas is Scottish and it means from a black stream. And you walk around here like a freeman from a black stream." And after I completed my PhD, I was actually hired by Xerox. 3 months, I couldn't get a good project. And one day, a young white man joined the group, and within a week, he was placed on one of the most exciting projects we had in research and development at Xerox at the time. Well, I was furious. I ran out of his office, down the hallway to the office of the senior vice president to give him yet another example of my being discriminated against. And a better problem to solve is a problem which is similar to the one that I have, but is being shared by others. And now today, it is worse than when I came in 1963. So this pendulum has really swung all the way back. And for me, it is just incredible to see within just a few years, this tremendous change. And what I think has happened is that during the period of the 70s, 80s, the 90s, those who were in leadership have gotten fat and they don't want to lose that which they have gained. I always used to say to people, if necessity is the mother of invention, adversity is the father of innovation.
Every leader has a story to tell, and the Safe Leader podcast uncovers the diversity story behind leading figures championing change to make our world a better place. Join me, your host, Mark McBride-Wright, as we hear from business leaders, academics, entrepreneurs, and agents of change as they share their journeys of innovation, resilience, and transformation. Together, we explore how they embrace the principles of safe leadership, sharing, acting, feeling, and empowering to create safer, more inclusive environments for everyone. Hello, welcome to the next episode of the Safe Leader podcast. I'm your host, Mark McBride-Wright, and I'm delighted today to be joined by Dr. Frank L. Douglas, who is a distinguished physician, pharmaceutical executive, author, and advocate for systemic change. With over 3 decades in the pharmaceutical industry, he made history as the first Black member of the Board of Management and Executive Vice President responsible for research, development, and regulatory affairs at a top global pharmaceutical company. Frank is the author of Until You Walk in My Shoes, a reframing methodology to overcome systemic discrimination, and the author of and the originator of the equity, inclusion, and individual engagement principle. Through his leadership at Safe Haven Dialogues, he helps individuals and organizations confront and reframe systemic injustice using storytelling, panel dialogue, and strategic tools to foster inclusive transformation. His career spans roles as CEO of the Austin Bioinnovation Institute, professor of the practice at MIT, and advisor to numerous biotech and healthcare startups. He has been honored with the Black History Maker Award and named a rock star of science by the Jeffrey Bean Foundation and GQ. Dr. Douglas brings unparalleled insight into how leaders can drive equity and innovation in parallel. Frank, welcome to the Safe Leader.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
You've had some incredible achievements there, and I love the variety of people that I get to meet through recording these shows, recording the podcast. And one of the things I love to get under to find out more about is the inspiration of what led you to do what you do now. So if we get in that time warp, if we get in that time machine, even get my words right, and we travel back, what inspired you to do the work that you do today?
Often young people ask me the question, how did I know that I would be doing what I am doing now, and how did I prepare for it?
Yeah,
And the truth of the matter is, I didn't know when I was a youngster
of
what
course.
life would be like. I grew up in Guyana, the poor family. At that time, you had to pay to go to high school, so I went to high school on a scholarship. And at that time, also, were no universities in Guyana. The first one is the only one we have actually was started in 1966. I fortunately got a Fulbright scholarship to come to America to do my undergraduate work in 1963. And just from there, I got a call from the United States Information Services to tell me that I was going to get a scholarship and I could choose which university I would like to go to in America. They thought because of my performance in what we call the A levels
Uh-huh.
in the British system, that I should probably do engineering. And the Lehigh was a great engineering school. I knew nothing about American universities. I grew up in British Guyana,
Okay.
so my idea was that after 2 3 years, I would have made enough money that hopefully I could go off to England and attend one of the universities. So here I was, and I started at Lehigh as
Uh-huh.
a Lehigh engineer.
And what did you study when you were in the US? What engineering background do you have?
Chemistry. I started actually as a chemical engineer.
Okay.
In my second year, I became really quite interested in physical chemistry. So I switched to chemistry. I remained in the engineering college, but there was a chemistry major. And my PhD is actually in physical chemistry. So
Okay.
I did a PhD at Cornell University in physical chemistry. And that I thought was going to be my life. I would be a professor in physical chemistry. And I got a job at Xerox, and because of discrimination at Xerox, I ended up going to medical school. So I also have an MD. I'm also trained as an internist and what is called a neuroendocrinologist. And
Wow.
most of my life has really been being between the scientific part of things and the medical part of things. And as it turns out, I became really ideal to be ahead of research and development. Research being the preclinical side of things, and the development being the clinical side of things.
Interesting. And so that is what then took you from Guyana to working in the boardrooms of the global pharmaceutical sector.
Yes, that's the path. I started off actually as an academic physician,
Okay.
and discovered because of some work I had done, a couple of studies. I was discovered by the pharmaceutical industry, and so they kept offering me jobs, and so I finally went to the pharmaceutical industry and remained in the pharmaceutical industry for about 24 years.
And how you've spoken about the importance of reframing problems. Can you share a personal moment when this approach changed how you moved forward? You've mentioned some experiences in your professional arc where you've then pivoted and then moved to another discipline, almost another industry, another sector. So have you had to like reframe moments in your life in order to move to the next step?
Well, the following happened after I completed my PhD. I was actually hired by Xerox. And
Okay.
for 3 months, I couldn't get a good project. And one day, a young white man joined the group, and within a week, he was placed on one of the most exciting projects we had in research and development at Xerox at the time. So I went to have a chat, yet another chat with my manager, and I was stunned to see the expression on his face when I said to him, Steve, don't think of me as though I'm Frank. Think of me as though I'm Bob. And he looked at me and he said, you're right. Bob has been here a week and I've put him on the artery project. Well, I was furious. I ran out of his office, down the hallway to the office of the senior vice president to give him yet another example of my being discriminated against. Now, 2 years later, I'm sitting in medical school thinking about that episode and realizing that I had made two errors. The first error was that Dr. Tribus, the senior vice president, that summer had hired three young black PhDs, I being one of them, to join the one black PhD that Xerox had at the time. And he had made it very clear he wanted to have more underrepresented minorities in research and development at Xerox. So I missed that. The second thing that I missed is that I was not clear about what my desired outcome was. It was not for the senior vice president to have tough words with my boss. I wanted a good project. For heaven's sake, I was a freshly minted PhD. I wanted to show my
Mhm.
stuff.
Of course.
Now, in 2018, when I was writing my memoirs and I was writing that episode, I then recognized something that I had actually learned from it. Because from thereafter, I started doing what, when I was writing my memoirs, I called reframing, but I didn't think of it that way. But I started looking for what I did call what was a better problem to solve. So even in medical school, when I was facing discrimination, I looked for the better problem to solve. Same when I went to the pharmaceutical industry. I looked for the better problem to solve. And the better problem to solve is a problem which is similar to the one that I have, but is being shared by others.
Okay.
Because I discovered that if you go to your supervisor to discuss a problem that is being shared by many, they're more likely to listen to that than if you go to them and say, here's my problem, what are you going to do about it?
Mm.
And so that was what started reframing. And it evidently worked well for me because, in spite of discrimination in the pharmaceutical industry, as you read in my bio, I became the first black to be on the board of management of a top three global pharmaceutical company.
Fantastic. And so when you were writing your first book then, Until You Walk in My Shoes, did you did you have to go through your entire history? I'm an author as well, so the process that you go through, the story mining, the revisiting past moments in your life, and almost going back to when it happened, and then writing it out and reliving the emotion. Um, how how did you find the process of writing your first book?
Well, my first book actually was my memoir, which is entitled Defining Moments of a Free Man from a Black Stream. Now, let me
Oh.
explain the title. When I was leaving Xerox, a technician who was a Brit and to whom I was saying goodbye, he said to me, do you know what your name means? And I said, no. And he said, well, Frank is Celtic and it means Freemason or free man.
Ah.
And Douglas is Scottish and it means from a black stream. And you walk around here like a free man from a black stream. And so my memoir is entitled Defining Moments of a Free Man from a Black Stream. And yes,
That's
I
great.
traced in that book, from age 12 in Guyana growing up and through my life in America, in academia, undergraduate, graduate, medical school, and then in the pharmaceutical industry, through to going back to academia at MIT, etc., and at the University of Ohio, and the various experiences that I had and what I learned along the way. And as I say, the book is also a testament and a thank you to many people whom I met along the way who were also very helpful to me. I not only experienced discrimination and had to deal with that, but they were also wonderful people whom I met along the way.
Do you find that that things are have we was talk about the pendulum swing and social justice movements and equal rights advancing, pendulum swinging forward, swinging back. In the arc of your career, how much progress do you feel we've made, and how much more do you think how far do you think we've still got to go?
My career is an interesting one. I arrived in America in August 1963, 8 days before Dr. Martin Luther King's famous March on Washington.
Wow.
And within those 8 days, I had experienced discrimination and what it meant to be discriminated based on the color of my skin, because, of course, people didn't know me. Later, I learned that in his famous speech, he said that he hoped one day his children would be judged not by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character.
Yes.
When I heard that, I knew precisely what he meant because I had experienced that. But I lived through 64, 65, the challenges, particularly of the late 60s. That was the time when now the National Organization of Women came into being, with all of the demonstrations against the Vietnam War. It was the Black Power movement, and there was just tremendous civil activity. In 1965, there was a civil rights law that was passed, which was the first thing that the president did. It was an executive order. He immediately got rid of that executive order. So I lived through. I came to America at the time of tremendous civil rights activity, saw the improvements. I myself benefited from it. As a matter of fact, when I went to medical school, it was about 5 or 6 years after the predominantly white medical schools had begun to accept minority students in medical school. So I benefited from that. And now today, it is worse than when I came in 1963. So this pendulum has really swung all the way back. And for me, it is just incredible to see within just a few years this tremendous change.
Do you think that's um do you think it's a function of society, people not having the roots of having lived when these moments happened in the past? And so it's a bit like when you talk about corporate memory in an organization is on average 7 years, and all of a sudden the same things keep getting tried, but they're thought of as new. If the people coming up now and that are living in society now didn't grow up in a time when lived through real oppression and civil rights, social justice movements, they kind of take it for granted, and they don't realize we don't realize. I'm part of that group. We don't realize just how much energy and effort and movement and coalition building goes in to actually moving things forward.
Well, there are two comments. The one comment is that indeed, people who do not know their history are destined to repeat it.
Yes,
And it is true that many of the young people don't really know the history. I lived through the 63s, the 70s.
absolutely.
Many young people don't, and unfortunately, they're not only not taught that history, but there are tremendous efforts to ban books that talk about the history. So that's the one side of the equation. The other side of the equation, however, that those who are making the laws, the those in the administration, those in the state governments, those in the Congress, they lived through those times. They
Mm-hmm.
know those times. Okay. So it is really very clear that what is happening is what we call buyer's remorse. Many of them participated in these changes, and for some reason, they have now decided they would like to return back to the pre 60s. And so they're supporting an administration that is really very clear that it wants to do that. And they are allowing it to happen, they are encouraging it to happen, and they know that of which, uh, you know, I speak now because they lived through it. So
Yeah.
we have the two things: the young people who don't know their history,
Yeah.
and those who lived through it, who, for whatever reason, want to return to those former days.
In the months kind of earlier this year, after the change in administration, in networking with other fellow DEI advocates, there was this idea of wintering, of coming together and weathering out the storm. And I listened to a fabulous podcast that spoke about actually the history of change. This actually is not unsurprising. It's a natural evolution of where things move. It's also in this moment a strange. It's a hypersensitized um, a combination of things because we're now in an interconnected world where you find out about everything straight away. Whereas in history, like, and I'm talking over the history of humanity, not just the last 50 years, we weren't able to find out about atrocities that were happening in other bits of the world because we never had the news, we never had the media. And so when the time scale is used of the most recent period of history, um, um, the the historian essentially said that we're entering a period of winter if we use the seasons as an analogy. But what will come is a beautiful spring where we blossom again. And that might be in 5, 10, 15 years. Who knows? It's a bit like what happened in the period you lived through, the 60s, the 70s, the flower power movement, the free love, etc., and like real liberation. And I wonder if in now mid 2020s is it are we we're in a very dark period of humanity, of history, it feels like, with all the chaos in the world. But I'm wondering if, as I get older in the decades to come, are we going to live through that spring, through that summer, where the pendulum doesn't swing back as far as it feels like it's swinging. And I guess you have to have hope, and that's then how do we, in as thought leaders, in the work that we do, in the work that we put out, how do we keep that hope ignited, so that we spark an interest in the young people coming through to learn their history and to role model positively and encourage the legislatures to not let things happen that take us back in time.
Well, I have a very simple approach to all of this.
Tell
The
me.
one I said, those who don't know their history are just trying to repeat it. The
Yes.
other one is there are no leaders. And what I think has happened is that during the period of the 70s, 80s, the 90s, those who were in leadership have gotten fat, and they don't want to lose that which they have gained.
Interesting.
The John Lewises, the Martin Luther Kings, the Malcolm X's, etc., the Chavez's of the day, okay, they were prepared, okay, to struggle, to be beaten, to go to jail, not to have much in the way of financial rewards. But I think the present leaders are frankly fat and happy. Let me give you some examples. Okay, in the 70s, when the farmers were being really oppressed in China and in China, sorry, in California, and they did not want the United UFW, United Farmers Workers Union. Chavez came forward. Okay, he led, in fact, at one time did a 1,000-mile march. Okay, and took the farmers on strike. Okay, and won that, and won a lot of things for the farmers. Today, we have a situation where you have ICE, as they're called, running down people who are at work in the farms, etc. Okay, people are afraid to go to work
Yeah.
because they're being picked up. Where is the Chavez of the day?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
and then the president says, well, perhaps we should, uh, not go after the farmers because they're the ones who put the food on the table and those who are in. Okay, where are the Chavezes of the day? It would be simple for them to bring all those farmers together. They're not going to work anyhow, and
Interesting.
have an action. I'll
Yeah.
give you another example. Okay. The administration is attacking Harvard.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So people ask me all the time, if I were Harvard, what would I do? I said, I would reframe. And they said, what do you mean? I said, well, for some reason, Harvard seems to think that Harvard is the set of buildings that sit in Boston. No, Harvard are the scholars, the professors, the
Yes.
scientists, and the students who come there. So if the administration says that they're not going to allow foreign students to come to Boston, so what? Make a collaboration with a university in Europe, in Canada, someplace else, where those students can go and live and where
Fascinating.
your faculty
Yeah.
can teach. And they don't
Yeah.
even have to travel there. We can
Yeah.
use Microsoft Teams, we can use Zoom, we can do whatever. So,
Yeah.
what is this? Why is that a problem?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So people clearly know what the solutions are. So I've concluded that what it is that they've gotten fat and happy and they're not prepared to have any type of uh, issue that disrupts their present life, etc. And that's what's going on. So they are allowing, these things to happen when indeed a simple intervention would put a stop to it.
Interesting. Yes, it's I love that suggestion, yeah, about still using the brand of the institution, and it's the people that make the culture, it's the
Yeah,
people that make
it's
the
not the
it's not a
concrete
set of
walls
built
and the
of
buildings.
course. Of
You
course. Of course. So with them
and in the global world, you know, these solutions are easy in the global world. It was not that easy in the 60s and the 70s, but in the global world, believe me, these solutions are actually available. But when leaders are not, you know,
yeah.
embracing what are clearly straightforward, obvious solutions, it means they have another agenda. And
Yeah.
that agenda is not an agenda that is focused on what's best for the institution. I talk about broad benefit, what's best for most of the people, for the students, what's best for all of those patients who now are not going to benefit from the research that goes on there, and and health, etc. When you're not thinking about it that way, but you're thinking about the discomfort that you're going to have if you no longer have your nice office and your nice labs to
Mm.
walk down Harvard Yard. I mean,
You've lost
that's what's
focus.
going
Yeah.
on.
So tell me then, Safe Haven Dialogues, you use the equity, inclusion, and individual engagement principle. Really keen to hear more about your work on and how your approach compares to traditional DEI efforts. What's your toolkit that you come to leadership teams, to organizations, to boards with to help them unpack some of these complexities?
Well, my basic principle and observation is that whereas perhaps in the 60s and the 70s there was a social consciousness, that doesn't exist. And the contract between a company and the employee is a straightforward contract. It's around productivity. I am paying you for the capabilities that you bring to help us provide a product solution to, you know, patients in one
Yes.
case, to consumers in the other case, etc. That's the contract. Since that's the contract, it makes little sense to try to convince, in my view, to try to convince a leader of a company who is not personally there that it is socially important to hire
Mm.
diverse people. It is important to demonstrate to that leader that diversity drives innovation.
Yes.
And diversity sits in people. It's not a strange thing out there.
Yes.
So when you hire people who come from different backgrounds, different cultures, trained in different institutions, are of different ethnicity, who have different ways of looking at things, you tend to get more diverse opinion and innovation. So let's not talk about diversity where you're just, counting your metrics about how many women you have, how many older people, how many people of color. Let's talk about why we are here, to be productive. And the one thing we do know is when people are valued, when they feel they belong, they're motivated, they're engaged. And when they're engaged and motivated, and the studies have been done, so, productivity goes up. So that is why I say very simply, let's look at individual engagement as the metric. Okay. Now, why equity and inclusion? And people have asked me, what's the difference between equity and equality? And I say,
Yep.
think of it the following way. It's a family. Equity inclusion is in every organization, starting with the family. But in a family, what does what do the parents do? They give each child what that child needs to thrive.
Yeah.
They don't treat each child equally.
Mm.
They give each child what that child needs to thrive. That's what equity is.
Mm.
So you give each of your employees what that employee needs to get to thrive in the work that they are doing. That's
I
it.
I loved I love bringing the analogy to family. You know,
That's it.
I love the bringing the analogy of equity to what you do in the family household.
Yep.
The number of times I've used slides that have boxes where the boxes are metaphors for some sort of positive action, and everyone gets the same box, but it doesn't achieve the outcome. And actually, you need to give people different boxes in order for
Yeah.
them to see over the
Yes. Yeah.
metaphorical fence. Um, just simply making it simpler,
Yeah.
and relate it to family. I've got a son and daughter myself, and you're right. They have different needs. They have
Yes.
different needs, so
Yeah.
they get different interventions from us as parents with regard to achieving like
Yeah.
that outcome to thrive at school.
And the same with inclusion. Yeah. You make sure that everyone in the family feels valued,
Yes,
feels that they belong, etc. So
feels
equity and
hard.
inclusion is basic in every organization, starting with the family.
Do
So
you
I don't debate about equity and inclusion. If you're an organization and you want to thrive, as long as you're using people and you're not using robots, okay,
mm,
you're going to have to deal and understand the issues of equity inclusion so that those employees, okay, have what they need to thrive, are valued, they feel they belong, and as a result, they become engaged and they are productive, and your company, your organization is productive and profitable.
what do you see then as the common misconception organizations have about systemic discrimination? Because when I work with leaders, and you talk about inequality, discrimination, people immediately respond with their own personal experience, an emotional reaction, or how they are angelic and aren't perpetuators of anything that's upholding system. Like, it's like they don't understand what systemic means, which by definition sort of decentralizes it from them specifically and just talks about how we've got the system we work within, which has been built through history and sustained through current behaviors and what have you, and it's the collective change that's needed. So how do you sort of cut through that when you're working with a leader, or an individual? It don't have to be a leader, or maybe leaders actually are enlightened to this understanding, and it's further down the organization that there's a misunderstanding. What's your perspective working with leaders on this stuff?
Yeah, well, and I mean, you've touched on it, is that most people, feel that they're being attacked, and of course
Yes.
they are pure, and they're not human, namely they don't make errors,
Yes.
you know, and it's, and unfortunately they take everything personally.
Yes.
Okay, so what I do is, since that is the case, I don't go there. I simply ask, what is it you're trying to achieve, okay, in your organization? What's your organizational goal?
Mm-hmm.
And let us look to see whether the actual things you're doing are helping you towards that goal.
Okay.
And sometimes it turns out, although we think we're doing the things that are helping the employees, to get to that goal, sometimes we're not. And so it makes a lot of sense to ask the employees, what is it they think they need that would help them to get you to your goal? Not to
Yeah.
help them
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
get to their goal, but to help you to get to your goal. So have that conversation with them. So move from the hierarchical type thinking more to a participative, distributed type of thinking where you want productivity, and therefore you listen to those who have to deliver that productivity to tell you whether they need a hammer or they need a pliers to do it.
How you've got experience in academia, you've worked at universities and in industry. So from that perspective of working in those two communities, where how do we I'm always interested to hear a perspective about changing the future system with the people that we have now, but also expediting that rate of change by positively influencing those coming through the education system as we have it now. And so there's two separate systems almost, the education system and industry. And if these are the leaders of the future, where are we embedding DEI work in that? And then as they come off the conveyor belt and then into industry or leadership roles, how will we change the system as we have it now? So what do you think we should be doing at the education level, at the university or younger level, when it comes to having this reframing mindset that you speak about?
Well, one of the sad things is that, and I remember this distinctly both for myself as well when I became a leader. You know, we hired these brilliant students with their PhDs, etc., come from the university, brilliant. And then they come to the company, and we've got to teach them simple things like how do you work in a team, simple things like recognizing that people have different types of approaches. They have, and some people are introverted, some are extroverted. People are different. And what you have to do is to recognize that and then to determine how you work together. They don't get those types of real life things in the university. And in fact, the unfortunate thing about universities is that the further up you go, particularly as you get in the graduate school, it's dependent on the individual leader.
Yes,
Okay.
yes,
And I have said to people is that, one of the things when you look at organizations, you take the university, it's the best example of the difference between uh, a value or a principle that an organization aspires to. I call it their aspirational values,
yes,
all the way down to what is actually practiced. And you go into the university, and so here are their aspirational values. It has different colleges, and you'll find those values are practiced differently in different colleges depending on the leader of that college. And then in any particular college, it's practiced differently in different departments and labs depending on the leader of that department
yes,
and that lab. Okay, you know, so I think it's a bigger problem in the universities with respect to preparing students for life because they are going to live the rest of their lives, okay, not in the university. Well, some of them will, but just a small number will remain as faculty, etc. But the bulk will be alive. So I think the universities more than the the organizations and
yes.
really need a DEI type
Yeah.
practices.
We've had that actually at my company, Equal Engineers. We do our training programs with employers, and then we've got a mentoring program that engineering students are paired up with engineers in industry. And then we've approached universities to, market the fact that we offer this to try and get students in. And then through doing that, we've also shared, the work that we're doing with industry. And it was a couple of years ago when one of our now they are now a university partner. They saw the work that we're doing with professionals in engineering and said, actually, we could do with some work like this for helping support our leadership development and our workplace culture. Because actually, it's not a very nice place to work right now. And it's exactly as you said, Frank. It's determined by the how committed the principal investigator
Yeah,
might be
yeah,
of a research group, and how much alignment there is between the aspirational goals and the lived goals, the
yeah.
values within the
Well,
group.
if that leader, that investigator, is well funded, he or she doesn't have to be part of the team.
Unfortunately, yes, that is the way that it's structured, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, what gives you the most hope then, looking ahead, about the future of equity in business and society?
Young people.
And
Young,
where,
I look at my daughters who are now, young women. But their friends are both black and white and Asian. That's
yeah,
whom they grew up with in uh, elementary school, high school, and college. Okay.
yeah,
And they, they're friends. They know each other as people, as individuals.
yes,
Okay. And that's my hope is that the young people, of course, right now, the young people are struggling because of the lack of jobs, etc. And so that's their major focus. And unfortunately, the, administrators are taking advantage of that, particularly in DEI, and saying to some of them, okay, you don't have a job because it's going to underrepresented minorities, and they're trying to make these, but the young people, they know, and I really do believe, as it was in the case, as a matter of fact, if you go back and you look at the '60s, and particularly around the Vietnam War, etc., it was the young people. In fact, it surprises me now that the young people in the universities are so docile. you know,
mm.
and they're not really raising the questions in a real sense about how they are going to be educated and how they're going to be educated now.
What
But I do
advice?
believe they are our hope.
What advice? So if you think about a leader who's working mid-career now, leading departments, teams, organizations, who wants to engage in this work, but for the climate that we've described thus far, feels unsure or afraid to make mistakes. What advice would you give to them?
Oh, to err is human, to forgive is divine. Nobody has the answers, but not doing anything is not an excuse. You know, fear of making mistakes is not an excuse. When you have, well, I'm a physician, if I have a patient who is very sick, okay, and I don't know what the diagnosis is, that's not a reason for me not to try to do something
Yeah.
to help that patient. I can at least look at the symptoms. Okay, even though I don't know what the diagnosis is that's causing those symptoms, I can at least start treating the symptoms and to help to improve the suffering until I can get to the root cause. you know.
Love that
So,
analogy. I love that. So simple. So simple. That's something people will really resonate with. What legacy do you hope to leave behind then through the work your history of work?
the legacy I hope is just that I spent my time focusing on contributing and not on controlling. When I ran large, groups of scientists, etc., that was one of the things I used to say to them: focus less on what you control and more on what you contribute. Because I found, many of the scientists, they were concerned about the size of their lab, and in Europe, how many windows their office had, etc. And, and I said, what I want you to be able to do is to be able to say you worked with teams that put that drug and that drug and that drug on the market.
Yeah.
That's what I would like you to. So that is what I am really very proud of, that I've had the opportunity to work with teams that is well over 25 now, that have put 25 drugs in the market that are helping millions of people whom I don't know.
Fantastic. Okay, quick fire question rounds. Are you ready?
Yes.
Right. What's the best piece of leadership advice you've ever received?
Listen to your people.
What's one lesson you've learned from adversity?
I always used to say to people, if necessity is the mother of invention. Adversity is the father of innovation. When there's adversity, it's an opportunity to innovate, to reframe.
What skill do you think every executive should develop?
The skill of listening and learning to reframe.
Tea or coffee?
Coffee in the morning, tea in the evening.
What's the one book that's shaped your thinking aside from your own?
The book by Scott Peck, the road less well traveled.
Who is a historical figure you'd love to have dinner with?
I'd love to have dinner with Socrates and with Nelson Mandela.
What's your go-to practice for staying grounded?
Thinking of the way I grew up.
What scientific or social breakthrough are you most excited about right now?
AI.
What's one mindset shift that has helped you the most?
Just to think, what's the better problem to solve?
Finally, what advice would you give to your younger self just starting out?
Be more prepared and open to be mentored, to recognize those who would like to mentor me and to be open to it.
Wow. Some great nuggets you've had in there, Frank. Some great little phrases there. I'll definitely be going back and re-listening to this to properly absorb them. If our listeners want to get in touch with you, to read more about your body of work, to find your books, to get in touch with you, how can they do that?
Best thing is to go to my website, which is safehavendialogues-llc.com. safehavendialogues-llc.com. That's a website, and you can get all the information how to reach me. You can also, if you're on LinkedIn,
Yep.
I post frequently on LinkedIn. You can find me on LinkedIn.
Fabulous. Well, we'll put that information on the show notes as well, and a link to your website and profile so people can find that easily. Thank you so much, Frank. It's been a pleasure.
Well, thank you for the invitation. I enjoyed the time we spent together. Thank you very much.
Thank you. You have been listening to the Safe Leader podcast, uncovering the diversity story behind leading figures championing change to make our world a better place. If you have enjoyed the episode, please subscribe to the Safe Leader podcast on your podcast platform of choice and get notified when a new episode goes live. Did you know that we also offer a full transcript on each of our podcast episodes? Check out my website, markmcbride-wright.com. Here, you can also explore the training, coaching, and keynote speaking services I offer. And whilst you're there, why not join the Safe Leader community by subscribing to the Safe Leader Insights mailing list? Thank you for listening, and please come back and join us on a future episode.